Welcome, trainers. Hopefully this is working now. Had minor technical difficulties, but it looks like we're good to go. Everyone hear me on stream? Sounds good. Well, welcome to the next edition of the Dev Fireside Chats. We like to do these monthly to kind of keep the community up to date with stuff that's going on the development side, as well as answer any questions that come up about the game, and just kind of chat with you guys, hang out, maybe play a little bit of story challenge. So this rendition of the Dev Fireside Chat's a little special since it's the first one since the launch of Story Challenge. Hope everyone's been enjoying it and has really sort of seen the progress of where we've come from a little bit under a year. So this will be kind of like a nice little celebration. Maybe I'll give away some free stuff for those of you that are involved. We'll kind of see how this goes. So Story Challenge obviously is our first real PvE game mode. We had the dojo or practice mode, as you guys have seen, that was really just a test for our battle engine. And so Story Challenge is our first foray into PvE. And as you guys have seen, it's a series of chapters about a given story about a trainer who's entering Kogia for the first time. And it's so far, I think the general feedback has been pretty good. I know that some folks said that it was too easy early on, but I think most people have changed their mind at this point. So Story Challenge is meant to sort of be one of those things that you have to kind of grind and play out. The armor wasn't meant to be something that you can win overnight, and so you'll be playing these and progressing your character, getting stronger, and we'll obviously be adding more and more content as we go. So one of the challenges about sort of building a PvE game, especially Story Challenge, was kind of finding the balance between telling a story and content that is engaging and gameplay itself. There's sort of always this balance when you build games between how involved the player becomes in the story. I think from the Cryptomon side, our game story is actually pretty enticing. As most of you know, we're also working on an MMO, and one of the hallmarks of an MMO is some quality stories. And I will say that the lore team has really done an amazing job in prepping a foundation for us to build out the world of Kogia. We've got some great storylines about, and most of them are sort of very adult themed. One of the things that we have done, I think the lore team mentioned it, is that the one of our tenets is that we're building a game for people who can handle adult content. So a lot of our storylines have a lot of depth. No, not throwing shade on Pokemon. Obviously, they're one of the best and greatest game franchises ever made, but sometimes their storylines can be a little childish. So what you'll find from our game is, and you probably have seen it in the comics and even in some of the Story Challenge stuff, is there's a lot more of instruments that's depth or death. We could do both, and you got some Dark Cryptomon there, so there shall be death too in the world of Kogia. So I think what we're looking to do is create entertaining stories that entice players to kind of pay attention and understand and really get engaged in the world, and become sort of invested in the storyline, and then sort of coupling that with telling an interesting gameplay. So the idea behind Story Challenge was to basically create a daily play mechanic for players to sort of play through a series of challenges, stages that get more difficult as you go. So I think most of you by now have realized that in the first few chapters, you're scaled down if you're level 50. Basically, each chapter is designed around 10 levels. So most of you have been playing it, but as you get further into the game content, right around chapter 3 is where things get a little bit interesting and a little more challenging. We also scale, not in addition to the opponents and enemy bots and AI, we also scale out the difficulty of the objectives. So we've got you've essentially got 3 tiers of objectives. You got your easy, your medium, and your hard. And as you progress in the chapters, it gets even they start throwing you some more difficult objectives. I think most of you probably know that the Trainers Club had an early release, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, the next tomorrow is the first day where somebody could potentially play normal mode. Um, Maybe I'm wrong, but I think tomorrow's the first day. It'd be interesting to see what folks say. Um, but it's definitely something that will test the skill. Perry's already calling out the probably the most difficult objective of all of them. So that's an interesting one. It becomes more interesting when you get armor too. So a lot of this stuff, obviously, it's an open beta. Not everything is set in stone. Most of the stuff can easily be changed and tweaked. One of the nice things about Story Challenge is that it is a framework. So when I look to build a game, I don't sort of think about things from just sort of like I'm building Story Challenge. Let's just build it this way. I think about how could I build Story Challenge in a way that it can be reused in the future to add more content or in other unique ways. And so I know a bunch of questions had come up about whether or not there'll be additional stories. I'm pretty confident that we'll end up having additional stories. I think the feedback so far is that Story Challenge has been good. People have been engaged in the story itself, and we, like I mentioned from like the lore team, has a lot of different content to talk about. I think what will end up happening is Story Challenge will end up being the primer for like the backstory for World of Kogia. So we'll set up characters, we'll set up different concepts, and sort of lay the foundation for engaging players into the world of Kogia. Go. Um, I think another question that had gotten mentioned, Nuclear Blob just sort of called it out, is will there be seasons? So I'm a big fan of like limited time events, seasonal type events. The the thing that I like about it specifically, at least in the blockchain gaming space, is um, the items that you can win become collectible, right? So if you only have one holiday event uh, a year where you can earn, say, a Santa hat, Santa hat's going for a million came on right now. I can drop them whenever. Um, the you can have the Santa hat, and basically people that participate once a year, you'll essentially be able to earn something that no one else can earn until that time next year if we rerun it. There's also the possibility that when we run seasonal events, you'll never see those items drop again. So I think the idea of using NFTs and blockchain tech um, in seasonal events is pretty cool. It gives you a lot of sort of capabilities to add player value, unique cosmetics, that type of stuff. Um, so that is in the plan. I know that I've mentioned limited time events. The way that it's planned to work is very similar to Story Challenge. I don't have too much to show on it because it's pretty much what you would expect. The idea is basically there'd be an announcement for a 7 day period where we'll open up a sort of additional story challenge. You'll basically go into the battle mode. There'll be a new panel that lets you pick, say, the holiday bonanza or saving Santa or something. And when you click on it, you'll get 9 stages. You'll get a series of objectives, and you'll get a different reward bar. As of right now, not everything is set in stone, but in general, the idea is that each seasonal or limited time event will most likely have a native currency. So one of the cool things about using blockchain tech is that we have access to things like ERC20s, and the way that the blockchain team has built out our diamond contract is we actually have a pretty easy way to go and create these. So the idea is that each seasonal or holiday limited time event will most likely have a currency that you earn as part of completing your stages on your rewards and your stars, and then you'll be able to use those to buy unique items. Those items could be player cosmetics, which I think we've also announced is coming relatively soon. It's one of the next features that we're looking to roll out, and then also potentially unique armor. So I think most of you had seen in a previous Dev Fireside Chat that there are 8 slots for Cryptomon, and we have only released 4. So there's 4 additional slots for Cryptomon armor. The plan is to kind of release them as part of some of the items as part of limited time events, and then other sort of giveaways and other mechanics. So that's sort of the general concept around limited time events that I know a bunch of folks were asking about. And like I said, that's under development. We've been making pretty good progress on it. So I would expect to see it sort of closely thereafter on the trainer's cosmetic stuff. Following year, cosmetic boots. Next year, jacket. Yeah, so that's one of the things we would potentially look at doing. Diggity is we might drop sort of a set over a period of time. The cool thing about that is you can actually maybe carry over your currency. So let's say like the holiday event was like the winter event was for the currency was snowflakes. If you didn't spend all of your snowflakes from one year to the next, since they're going to be ERC 20s like tokens on your account on your wallet, you'd be able to essentially save them and use them the following year. So it's kind of a cool mechanic. The other thing we've talked about doing on the limited time events is creating unique consumables. So you could imagine something like a Yuletide ale or something for the holidays that would maybe restore some health but also buff your attack. So kind of like compound bonuses and things like that. Um, it's a good question, Perry. We haven't really talked through some of the mechanics. I know we've done a lot with the bound token concept. I tend to like to do that for balancing purposes. We'll sort of see what it comes down to. We have a couple of different approaches that we've been kicking around. One is to not have the tokens be bound and allow them to be sold, and then instead of us selling token packages, we would sell the cosmetics directly. So you can imagine, like, let's say a player doesn't have time to finish everything, they really wanted the Santa hat. We would sell the Santa hat. That would basically make it so that way players would essentially be able to um, still get access to the items. We could still sell them. But as you mentioned, the main challenge is really that people can play on multiple wallets. So obviously, we know that players have 9, 10, 15 Cryptomon in some cases, and they're farming across wallets. So we always take balance into account. I think with a little spoiler, we have an upcoming sale for scraps that'll come out I think in March. But those types of sales will be account basically wallet bound, so the wallet limited. So you'd only be able to buy one because obviously the goal for us is to kind of keep the game away from pay to win, still be able to generate revenues to pay out rewards, and then sort of keep players interested. So we'll use the blockchain tech wherever we sort of see fit to kind of control the balance of things. So bound tokens, limited sales, that type of stuff. So I think what I'll do, I think a bunch of folks had mentioned that they potentially wanted to see some of the normal mode gameplay. So let me see if I can queue that up. Then we'll sort of see how that goes. Got a couple of things to talk about. Let's see. All right, so hopefully that's working. So as I mentioned, normal mode should, in theory, release. I think it opens up tomorrow. I'll probably play a little bit of normal mode, show you a little bit of the changes. Like I mentioned, the current design on Story Challenge is that every chapter is 10 levels essentially. So chapter 1 is basically 0 through 10. Chapter 2 is 10 through 20, 20 through 30, 30 through 40. At chapter 5, things change up and it goes to 5 levels because the training requirements between 40 and 45 are pretty steep, and then from 45 to 50 in chapter 6. The current balancing in normal mode is the bots are level 60. I think the HP cap is somewhere around 710, something like that. So it scales up their attack and their defense as well as their HP. So it's most definitely a challenge in terms of sort of the difficulty. I actually don't even know. Let's see. I'll at least feed up and then get ready for the battle. All right. think that's close enough. Okay. It's out of the way. It's gonna be in the way until later. Um, so as you can see, once you get all of your story items opened up, you have access to normal and random mode. Uh, they pretty much what happens is when you pick one, it opens up and it picks a random chapter for you and assigns you to that chapter. And you can kind of see here that the reward bar has scaled slightly differently. So the idea during regular story chapters was to really focus on helping players level. You saw a lot of star tickets. You saw scraps that were increasing over time. Normal mode is meant to be endgame play. And so this is the first time that you'll end up seeing Kamon rewards. The way that the Kamon rewards are basically designed is you've got a small, a medium, and a large Kamon reward. If you look at the normal mode bar, you can essentially see the small Kamon at 12. Your medium Kamon's at 27. If I were to open up hero mode, essentially you'd end up with your medium at 12 and your large at 27. So you can earn 2 Kamon rewards a day depending on how far you progress. The other change is that we've moved scraps around, so you earn scraps as you progress. You can see here, I think it's 1 at 3, 1 at 9, 1 at 21. And then you also, I think in normal it's set to be it's a silver and a gold chest right now. But I think we may end up changing that up. I'm still working on balancing consumables. And then the in hero mode it's double gold chest, I think. So you have a fair amount of chance to get larger consumables normal and hero mode. I know that there are people that had some concerns about that, but that's something we'll obviously keep an eye on. If you look at the way that the challenges are set, in normal mode the first 2 objectives are medium objectives, and then the third is a hard objective. You'll also notice basically you don't get any you don't get just a star for winning anymore. You actually have to complete objectives. So it definitely increases the difficulty. And so people, I think one of the things that's come up is like how difficult is normal mode. It's not designed to be completed with bronze armor, even with Ultra Cryptomon. As you'll probably see, I'll struggle through a fair amount of it. I've been mostly completing it since it opened, not using hopefully any replays. But then you can see on this first one, you've got no physical attack, which is one of the harder ones. Knock out your opponent's final Cryptomon with an elemental spell, and generate 24 elemental charges during battle. So let's see how this goes. I got locked out. Alright, so we've got double air and electro. I'll end up swapping for stone strike. So most people are probably going to want to end up playing 3 Cryptomon in your teams in normal and hero. The objectives are pretty difficult. So as you can see, I've decided not to go after the physical objective in this one. There's definitely some strategies on how you handle this. These bots are pretty strong. 688, 664, 670. I'm hoping some of those are defensive, otherwise I'm in trouble here. So I think one of the nice things about Story Challenge and Armor is things change significantly. You now have a lot of choices when it comes to sort of building your armor and essentially figuring out whether you want to be a tank or if you want to be offensive or more balanced. As you can see, the bots definitely hit way harder. Probably killed here. The bots also seem a little bit smarter. I'm not sure if it's because they have stronger stats and they're more aggressive, but they definitely seem to really come after you. I've had like situations where I had everything set up perfectly for finishing 3 objectives, and then the bots like seemingly knew just exactly what was going to happen, and then essentially came after me and ended up killing me. Um, they also hit a lot harder, and they're smarter about using elemental objectives, so or elemental advantage. So it's definitely challenging for sure. I know that some folks had said that they really like the objectives bar. I wasn't sold on it at first, which is why it wasn't in the game. Um, but I'm a convert. Ever since it's been added, it's been a lot better. I don't have to remember the objectives; it tracks them, which is pretty cool. Um, so you can kind of see they've got higher health. They definitely hit harder. Most of the time, they're hitting harder than my Cryptomon, which is obviously rough when I'm wearing armor and they're not. But yeah, so this is the normal mode is really just focused around more difficult objectives, and sort of stronger bots. I forget. I think the hero mode is, I want to say, level 75 or 80. Um, so they're definitely hero mode. I think I couldn't even beat the bots. I think it's the first time in a long time I've actually lost, like legitimately lost, and there was nothing I could do. I didn't make any mistakes. They just absolutely wrecked me. I think the most I had gotten to was 2 Cryptomon down on the bots, and then 200 health or 300 health, which is like half health on the last one. Um, so they're definitely it's definitely a challenge. This one, I seem to have gotten mostly defensive bots this time, which makes this a little bit easier. Just see. Had anyone else have any other questions on story challenge? I know most of you probably have been knee deep playing it, so you have a good feeling for how everything works. Oh, locking me out. I see. There's a lot of Wall of Wind being played by the bots. One of the things I find super interesting is the bots are using a chess engine, or a chess-like engine that basically runs game simulations in real time. So basically, what it's doing is it's checking, it's guessing a move, making a decision, and then checking to see what that outcome looks like. So it basically simulates matches for 3 or 4 turns deep. And it's interesting to watch the bots play, especially in normal mode, because there's a lot of stuff that a lot of players don't. There's a lot of stuff that players you don't see in regular gameplay, um, but you are seeing it from the bots. They definitely pull back on shielding, which I find interesting. Um, they definitely nest. They do use sandstorm, in normal mode. It's not as frequent as I would expect. It's kind of interesting. It makes me think that there's something that the bot sees that we don't see. I personally really like Sandstorm. I use it pretty heavily. Obviously, it gets pretty wrecked by air sometimes. Um, yeah, I've seen that too. I don't. I think a lot of times the Sandstorm use with the swap is because they don't want to give shields into a charge, into charges into a shield. So like if you shield, a lot of times the bot will essentially try to not give you additional charges. We'll kind of keep an eye on it, but the bots definitely seem to be smarter when they have more stats. So in this case, this team was stronger than me stat wise, and so it will play more aggressive, than a normal team would. I definitely find that the bots are super aggressive in normal, more so than even in SC6, and then even from there, basically, um, compared to the dojo where you occasionally get hero bots. It's funny because we had talked about the bots in the dojo basically being hero bots. In reality, they ended up being weaker than normal mode bots. So, for frame of reference, I think the bots in the dojo go up to like 55. So that's normal mode. As you can see, sometimes it's not too bad. It really depends on the bots that you get. Two Cryptomon dying. I missed that. Um, so why don't we take a pause to talk about some other stuff going on, and maybe we'll play the next stage after we get through some of this stuff. Huh? I didn't have two Cryptomon dying, did I? I think they were alive. So a few minor spoilers, I guess. Bring some of this stuff up. So I know we have shown some of the Battle League stuff. We do have some minor stuff going on. I know probably not super enticing, but we've been doing some UI work to kind of bring the game up into more of a cleaner, more modern type look. So we are reworking a bunch of sort of the aesthetics of the game. A lot of it's being prepped for World of Kogia, but will most likely make its way back down into Genesis at some point. So we've got essentially a new, sleeker UI, a little bit more square, less sort of less pink, which I know some folks have said that they like the newer version. So we've got some cleaner looks. For those of you that have seen it, it also will end up matching some of the work that's being done on the trainer hub. So we're not doing nothing sort of groundbreaking, but in general, we're trying to kind of clean up the UI and prep so that way it looks a little more modern. The square and less rounded corners look a little bit better. So also you'll notice we've done some scaling. I think some folks had mentioned on the emoji or the emoji bot, and then the consumable, the buttons were too big, so those have been scaled down a little bit. When marketing, you can have a marketing a marketing stream at some point. We'll get the team on when Binance. Good question. When Binance, we'll see. So that's, I think, some stuff that we've been doing on the UI side. I think most of the people that have joined the stream are really mostly interested in the spoilers around new spells. So let's just dive into that. So the next sort of segment, as I mentioned, we've got trainer cosmetics coming up. We've got the limited time challenges, and then we also have new spells under development. So some of the stuff is more polished and balanced than others. So anything that's sort of teased here in general is also is sort of subject to change. But there are two sort of types of spells that are coming out. You've got what I consider or call group utility. So as of right now, in general, you don't see too many group spells in the game, I think, if any. And so one of the unique aspects of playing 3v3 is that is the ability to kind of create spells that affect the group, your team and your opponent's team. So we've got a series of spells that are called that I consider kind of like group utility. The thing to keep in mind is, in general, the elements have archetypes, so they will stay within their archetype in terms of like how the mechanics work and the things that they function on. So like grass will remain sort of a general healer element, and then you've got sort of your burning and damage over time on fire, defensive on Perry. You might want to leave the group right now then. And then you've got your sort of defensive on ice. So actually the silence. Oh, that might be I didn't actually look. The infographic might be wrong. The silence is actually not a grass spell. Hold on 1 second. Oh, I think they might be mixed up. That's my fault. I didn't review it. So allergy should actually be down with silence, and silence should be up in ghost. Um, so that is a small mistake, but we'll get that fixed for the infographic. So the only change is basically allergy comes down to grass, and silence goes up to ghost. So the second set of spells are something that I find much more interesting and something that the team has really been talking about. And sort of in general, there's been a lot of talk on the periphery, questions about it, which is sort of the interplay between elements becoming more of an interesting factor in the game. So obviously, the elements are the core of the concept of Cryptomon and Kogia, and they serve sort of the foundation for the entire world. And so we're going to continue to kind of play up the benefits and the balance on elements. The second set of spells are what I would consider called group AOE buffs. AOE is an area of effect. Typically in RPGs, it means it basically it affects everything within range. In this case, basically, it's a group team spell. So the spells in general will essentially do AOE damage to the entire opponent's team, and then also put a debuff on your opponent. And that debuff basically increases damage from another element for that Cryptomon. So, for example, I think so. The group debuffs, AOE debuff spells are Sunburn for fire, Ocean Sound for water, and then we've got Ice Age for ice. Earthquake is for ground, and then Breeze is the air spell. Electrolysis is the electro spell. Curse is the ghost spell that does the AOE debuff, and allergy is the grass spell. So in general, what will end up happening is the Cryptomon that casts it will do a small amount of damage to every Cryptomon on the opposing side. The thing that's super interesting about this is right now a lot of players, it kind of expands the strategy, so a lot of players will hide their Cryptomon on the bench. And that no longer becomes necessarily a viable option if your opponent is carrying an AoE. So you can imagine a Cryptomon that's at 15 health that you hide on the bench, thinking you'll let it sit there, and then your opponent casts an AoE spell and it dies. The way that the debuffs will work, we're still working through the mechanics, but they're based on the spell advantage wheel. So, for example, I think you look at elemental advantage, and elemental advantage is such that your spell basically is stronger than the next element on the wheel. The way that this mechanic will probably end up working is the AOE, the debuff that gets put on will be for the spell, the element that's 2 on the wheel. So basically skipping a slot. The general concept is that that element already protects the other elements. So for example, like ground, if you have a ground Cryptomon and a ghost Cryptomon, your ground Cryptomon can help do more damage to an Electro if there's one on the other team. So the idea here is that your ground AoE will most likely buff your ghost damage. So as I mentioned, we're still balancing a lot of the stuff. The general concept is that we want to kind of create more of an interplay between the elements. I think a lot of you mentioned this. We're also kicking around the idea of potentially stacking the debuffs, but like I mentioned, there's still a little bit of balancing to be done on the group AoE spells. But the general idea is that they'll essentially be used to do damage to the entire team and then somehow buff the opposing element. So those are the group AoE debuffs. The group utility are going to be, like I mentioned, designed specifically around the elements already sort of archetype role within the game. The current plan So Scorch is the fire one. The current plan is that it will be some version of a dot that goes on all Cryptomon, like a group burn. We're still working through some of the mechanics. The general concept is to try, like I said, try and stay within the same elements archetype, as well as sort of add a little bit more interesting aspects to it. Purifying Spring, which is the water spell, is a group cleanse. So it will remove all debuffs off your entire team. So, for example, let's say you've got a debuff from Sunburn, and you've also got Hydra, and then maybe some other debuff from Ice Age or something like that. It will basically remove all of those. We are still that's the one that's still under sort of discussion and design. There's a chance that it will also make you immune from debuffs for a period of time. The hard part with a lot of these spells is balancing the cost versus the benefit. So, like, Purifying Spring, if it costs 4 and offsets the Hydra, it's kind of net neutral, but it'd be definitely more interesting to potentially have the Purifying Spring give you, like, an ability to block debuffs for a period of time. Icy Spikes is a group defensive spell. So the idea here is it works a little bit similar to Frozen Armor, but instead will buff the defense of all of your Cryptomon. Like I mentioned, most of the stuff is I don't have sort of hard numbers on any of it. Obviously, it will scale based on the cost. In general, when we design spells, we look at sort of the cost to benefit. And the idea here is, like, if the benefit is higher, then it's going to end up costing you more. The next is Quicksand, which is an interesting one that we're still testing. Some of these, like I mentioned, have very unique capabilities that the game doesn't have today, and so we're still sort of working through the balancing. Quicksand essentially increases the cost of your opponent's spells. How much and what that means is going to pretty much be based off of, like, how much it costs. But you could imagine something like Quicksand increasing the cost of all spells by +1 or something like that, which becomes a much more interesting mechanic. It's sort of the counter to what Sandstorm does. The Earthquake. So Earthquake is the group AoE debuff for ground. So it will do ground damage to all of the opposing Cryptomon, and then, like I said, most likely buff ghost damage. The next spell in the list is Whirlwind Barrage. This one is for those of the testers and some folks that played early. They will know this as the original Wall of Wind. This is going to be one of the ones that we're still really heavily trying to balance. So the original Wall of Wind essentially prevented all of your Cryptomon from using physical attacks. So the general concept here for Whirlwind Barrage is that it will block your physical attacks on your opponent's Cryptomon. So, like I mentioned, definitely a challenge balancing some of this stuff. But there's it definitely will make the gameplay much more interesting, needless to say. I will also mention the goal for the new spell drop is to also let you carry a third elemental spell. So, in addition to your 2 current elemental spells, you'll get a third spell slot in order to carry another spell, which also in general makes things much more interesting. So, yeah, the no physical objective. Axel, have you gotten? I don't know if you've gotten the Nightmare debuff in SC6 yet. That thing is annoying. It doesn't pop up as much. I need to check on whether or not it's a bug or not. But the Nightmare debuff basically prevents you from casting elemental or physical spells for like 6 turns. It's a fun one. I don't know how many people have seen it yet. I think it's in SC6. I don't think it's just in normal mode. The Overload. I guess I need to sell my Cryptomons and buy new ones. It's interesting. So, like, I don't know how many of you have played sort of competitive games that have this challenge of balancing, but you always get what are called like the meta of the release. So like there'll always be one meta build or a group of spell specs or things that just make things more interesting, and that are stronger slightly than the rest. And basically, it's just a constant balancing act. Your best bet tends to be play what you like or have everything. Those are sort of the two types of things that'll happen. It'll be, I mean, it's a constant battle. I will never stop balancing the game. Basically, if I balance the game and it doesn't need any more balancing, we're not trying hard enough to push the envelope. So we'll always sort of see balancing. Like I had also mentioned, I think some folks had asked, I don't know, they might have been in Trainers Club, um, about Hydra and the balancing. So Hydra technically is overbalanced right now. The cost of the damage is slightly the amount of damage is slightly higher than it should be for the cost. It was originally designed that way because Purifying Spring was supposed to potentially go live in the first set of spells, but then we decided to pull all group spells out. So there were two group spells, and it became apparent that it was just not, it wasn't going to work. So we ended up pulling Purifying Spring and changed Wall of Wind, and replaced it with Whirlwind Barrage. But the idea here is that as we see the game progress, we'll take a look at things like Hydra and everything in general and balance accordingly. We have a pretty good handle on the ratio of charges to damage that should be done. And so none of the spells are ever really going to be designed to be super, super strong. And if they are, eventually, obviously, they'll end up getting balanced. So that's Whirlwind Barrage. We talked about blocking physical attacks on your opponent's Cryptomon. Overload is another interesting one. This one is still going to have some play testing with it, but the general concept is that it will buff all of the elemental damage for your entire team. We are playing around with the concept of it potentially increasing incoming damage, so it's almost like a pro and con, but we're sort of still working through some of those mechanics because that concept fits with the next round of spells potentially better. But the idea is that it will stay with the existing archetype. It will stay with the existing archetype of being focused around elemental damage buffs. The next one we had Overload is Silence. So Silence is the reason why I had mentioned Nightmare from the Dark Abomination, which I guess not everyone necessarily knows about on the public channels, but I guess we'll see. I won't spoil too much of it. I don't think I was even in SC6 when playing, but the spell basically will block elemental spell casts for a period of turns. So essentially, it's like a silence. It does not affect ultimates right now. Only elemental spells. So you can essentially lock your opponent to not being able to cast elemental spells. So that's what silence is. Like I mentioned, most of the stuff we're just trying to figure out what the cost is versus how many turns it works. And then Kojia's Touch is obviously a grass spell, and it is focused around group AoE healing. So Kojia's Touch is almost like a reverse of Hydra. Basically, what it does is it allows the caster to put a heal over time on all of the Cryptomon. So essentially, you cast it, and over the next X number of turns, a certain amount of damage is healed across all of your Cryptomon. Obviously, it'll be way less than Nature's Blessing, because it impacts all of the Cryptomon. But it will definitely, a lot of these will be game changers. You'll have to look to basically figure out how to silence your opponent's grass Cryptomon in order to prevent them from healing, things like that. You can purge heals, purge healing over time. There's a lot. I think what's interesting, for those of you who probably know, I have a very sort of soft spot for World of Warcraft. And so RPGs and that type of stuff, I've been working to kind of take some of the coolest mechanics that I've seen in the games that I've played and bring them into turn-based play. I don't think a lot of games have actually done this before. It's kind of an interesting mechanic and a way to approach things. You basically take things that would normally be on like a tick timer if you were doing real-time combat, and you instead use turns to kind of spread them out. it's kind of an interesting way. It definitely adds to the strategy. You have to know that your opponent has the ability to heal over time. You have to basically know when they're going to cast it to be able to silence. So there's definitely a lot of interesting things. Ideally, over time, I'd like to find ways where like you can start using spells in conjunction, where basically like you could silence your opponent's heals and then go and overload to basically to nuke them. So we'll kind of see. I think that's one of the other reasons why consumables came out to add more interesting mechanics to them. Um, like I said, as we sort of go through this, we'll sort of look to balance things. There's a few things in the game engine that would allow us to potentially even put a cooldown for X number of turns on a given spell. So you could imagine, for example, and this is something we're still working through, is your silence might only cost one charge, but you can't cast it for another 5 turns after that. It becomes sort of like that cooldown mechanic that we've been playing around with. So some of those group utility spells might end up being low cost, high benefit, but limited cast. So, like I said, we're still working through a lot of the engine mechanics on the games, and we'll do a bunch of play testing and balancing. But I think one of the things I like to see is more spells being cast with sort of overlapping abilities. And the best and really the one way that you have to do that is you have to be able to control how often they can cast. So like having someone be able to silence for 4 turns, but basically not have a limit on it, like either the other team's going to basically be silenced the whole time. Um, so that's sort of the thought process behind some of the updates to the game engine that will be coming. Actually, I ran pretty long. Any other questions on spells right now? I think there are. All right, let me. I guess I'll play one more spells or story challenge. I'll take any questions really right now. So I think let's play. I guess the next stage, and then we'll be mostly done if there's aren't any other questions. I gotta check the list of things that the team sent me. Actually, give me one sec. I'll check to see what. Make sure I hit all of the questions. So. New spells, limited time events, we covered that. Will there be more chapters? Yes. Utility on hoodies. So I think this question comes up quite a bit. Let me just take a look. Generate 10 charges. Use spell efficiency. Knockout with 3. Oh. So I think one of the things that comes up a lot is the cosmetics. So we have sort of this unique challenge in the short term, specifically in Genesis, where there's not as much focus on the trainer, and that limits the benefits that we can sort of add to the game for cosmetics. So the Cryptomon the Cryptomon balance is really focused around armor for combat, and I'm trying to avoid having combat stat mechanics. That's painful on the trainer because it becomes way harder to balance. Because then instead of 8 slots, I've got 16 slots. There are a lot of mechanics that exist in Walk World of Kogia. The most likely a lot of the cosmetics will end up getting utility at that point. Things like run speed, stamina. I think maybe I've shared some screenshots, but there's actually a trainer health or stamina bar in World of Kogia. So like in order to whenever you battle, your trainer gets loses stamina because they get basically the concept is it's like an energy bar. You'll also lose stamina potentially for other types of activities, like gathering and things like that. So the idea is that the trainer cosmetics will most likely have some utility there and not be cosmetics only. That's very nice. Even even the stupid bot likes Hydra. Although surprisingly, I don't think Hydra gets cast nearly as much as you would expect by the bots. I don't know. I haven't. haven't really seen it cast all that much, which makes me wonder like what the bot is thinking. Um, yeah, we also talked about Tamagotchi related bonuses. Parry too, just because I think that's something that does exist in game today. The challenge there is that we obviously also have the Tamagotchi power ups. So the caring boost power ups are also there, which definitely I don't want to sort of double dip and sort of add a compounding issue. Well, this is going to be it. Um, so that's I'm trying to kind of avoid mixing and matching utility if possible. Obviously, a bunch of stuff will be cosmetic only, collectibles, that type of stuff. That always does really well. I'm a big fan of sort of things that things that are unique that only I can own. So like those limited time event cosmetics are pretty cool. Um, there has been some discussions about slowing, like you said, um, slowing down the timers on Tamagotchi stats potentially with some of the trainer cosmetics. In terms of leaks, I will say, and this is a wicked early. There is actually a set of trainer clothing in World of Kogia that is battle focused. It is very end game though. It's basically essentially what you're working towards literally the entire game. So a little spoiler there about some of the mechanics in World of Kogia. Um, I think we'll sort of see as we go. Everything is sort of on the table, but obviously I like to keep things balanced. Um, so we'll kind of see. I'm essentially if something is a cosmetic only in the short term, there's no guarantee it's going to stay that way. So if we know that there will be essentially utility for sure, like the I think we said the NFT Hunter um, hoodie will have utility for sure. That we'll sort of mention it. Obviously, the timeline is not necessarily a commitment. We'll just have to kind of see where things fall. The nice thing about the NFTs and the fact that you guys are playing early is you can earn them now, and when we add them later to all of our games, they become useful there. I think that's probably one of the coolest things that I've seen, at least about the use of blockchain, is you essentially you don't end up buying something, the company builds another game, and then you never get to use it again. In addition to being able to sell things and you owning your assets, it's pretty cool that the assets can kind of run across games. I don't know if everyone has probably heard, but my dream is to build a game called Cryptomon Racing League, which is essentially like a Mario Kart mashup, how to train your dragon type racing game. And so like the idea is things that you could earn in World of Kogia, like a harness or a riding crop or things like that that you can use to go faster would also basically be useful in that type of game. So I think the a lot of people don't realize like the true extent of what it means to have NFTs that span games. It becomes a much more compelling reason for players to kind of invest their time and their money and really be part of the ecosystem. So I think over time we'll sort of play with those mechanics and really sort of figure it out as we go. How many scraps in the bundle release? We're still working through the numbers exactly. It's probably going to be 10 or 20. Um, Obviously, the goal is to not make the game pay to win. I don't want to have people being able to buy hundreds of scraps. I want you to play the game. So I think that's probably what we'll be. We'll probably be in there somewhere in that range. I think we're also going to probably drop some health potions as part of the bundle. I know I personally would like some more health potions. So I think that will be helpful. Um, so I think that our general approach is always focus on enticing and rewarding the players for playing the game, and then using cosmetics and other unique things that are not necessarily game breaking to kind of allow players to spend to catch up. Well, this bot is ridiculous. Gonna be here. This bot's gonna end up killing me. Guy's like stronger than my bot with my Cryptomon with armor on. Guess we'll heal. He's probably gonna heal too. as you can see, this one is a little bit more difficult. This 5'10", this Bolt guy is definitely an attack Krypton. He hits wicked hard. Now we're getting somewhere. Nerf heals. Killing me here. Any other questions while I try and not die to this bot? I heal again. I think we're just literally in a healing match, although I think he's better off than I am. Looks like he is, actually. Looks like he's winning the match. So I need to change it up. See if he actually... Yeah, that was a mistake by the bot. Now we're good. Oh, wait, let's see if we can kill this guy finally. Let's go here, get the objective. What am I at? 200, 220, 150. I'm actually behind here, I think. I think we'll be okay. Something you need to learn since you have to be a YouTuber. How do you manage speed? No, I can't. It's impossible, Benjamin. I have no idea. Like, the first time I played on stream, the freaking bot wrecked me, and I got crap from it from everybody forever. It's pretty funny. I lost to, like, dojo bots, which was pretty pathetic, to be honest. I'm getting a little bit better about it. I feel like if I was playing other players, it's a lot harder. Like, I don't know if I could play, like, Junior or Moto or somebody on stream and still be able to talk and pay attention. True. Killing me, Drew. I almost lost. No, I didn't. But this battle was definitely more difficult. Mostly because that other bot, and I don't have any charges. I'm actually going to... unfortunately, because of that bug, I'm going to have to use a charge potion because it's not going to count. I got to fix that bug, apparently. I think the other thing that I think a bunch of people asked about was... this is probably gonna kill me here. Huh. The bots can't use consumables, thank God, because that would just be ridiculous. I don't think I could handle the bots with consumables. We do have a patch that just came out that the bots can wear armor. So there's a chance I might change some of the scaling in normal mode and hero mode and lower the bot levels and add armor instead. It might make balancing a little bit easier and cleaner. The other thing I was going to mention before we go, scraps, is I know that there's been a lot of questions about trainers club badges. So we are working through the way that we're going to drop the trainers club badges. I also need to do some work to basically give beta access when you have them in your wallet. So it probably won't be in the next patch or two, but we might drop the trainers club badges before that. Essentially what we're going to do, we know that there was a whole bunch of folks that were basically just NFT hunters and people that created lots of accounts that were trying to get stuff to sell during that hunt, and the people that we want to have the badges are the players. So we are going to keep the mint at the same number, so we're not going to have any more. We're going to set the cap on the number of trainers club badges that existed before, which I think was like 2,900 or something like that. Somewhere around there. Don't quote me on that. And then we will basically be looking at game activity. And so anyone that has won a badge that has played the game will have it airdrop to them. And then the remaining badges will go into a pool to be issued as rewards for different activities. So the idea is to kind of keep a lot of the badges within people that are playing. I think there were like 15,000 people, and most of them were NFT hunters in that hunt. And so I don't necessarily want the badges to go to them, most likely because they're dead wallets and no one will ever see them. And I like to have folks that have trainer club access, like 2,900 badges when we end up having, if we have 100,000 players, is like nothing. So the idea here is that the trainers club badges will be minted. You'll be able to buy them and get access. We'll do some work on the game to make sure that if you have the trainers club badge, you will have access to the beta features. And then obviously, as always, you'll have access to pre-release drops and early access to everything. So if you're a player now, I definitely recommend picking them up when they go up on the marketplace, just because I suspect they'll be pretty scarce and most people will hold on to theirs. Let's see. I think I got time for maybe one last question since I was running late before. I know it's not related to the topic at hand, but any thoughts on multiple hunting badge holders? I assume you're talking about the hunter passes. Um, the hunter passes we're still evaluating. There's been a lot of mixed information about the hunter passes, specifically like whether they stack, whether they carry the benefits of the ones before them. I think where we're going to end up is that the hunter passes themselves will end up carrying the benefits of the ones below them. So, for example, silver hunter pass, you get 6 boxes. The gold hunter pass will end up basically having the ability to get silver boxes, an increase in silver, or sort of, I don't know what we call the boxes, but it'll include other types of boxes. There's a chance we'll be dropping other types of like consumable boxes. Um, we also will probably be redefining the benefits. So like the gold hunter pass has access to silver box items right now, so we'll probably also give an increased drop rate on like medium consumables or something like that. So kind of keep the tiers in general. We tend to do things in like 3 tiers, like small, medium, large, uh, bronze, silver, gold, that type of stuff. In general, the passes will sort of follow that same mechanic. So silver will just always be the base. You get 6 extra boxes, which doubles your drop rate anyway. After that, it'll sort of be like your sort of medium and large, and then NFTs is really the theme of the hunter passes. I plan on putting some info up on the academy once I sort of finalize everything. The stacking makes it much more difficult because when you, for example, stack like an NFT, if you stack a diamond with like a platinum, theoretically you're reducing your NFT drop rate. So like because if you think away the way odds work, if you drop if your platinum increases your chance of gold boxes, it also means it's cutting into the NFT increase because you're increasing the overall pool. So the idea is that we probably won't stack them, but we'll sort of carry the benefits in tiers. Um, Obviously, that will eventually make them more valuable, and so anyone that does happen to have multiple, I suspect you'll be able to flip them pretty easily. We are also talking about adding the game login system to the Pink Moon app, which will, in theory, allow you potentially to hunt um, multiple like basically with multiple accounts on one device. I know that that's been something where it's sort of a constant challenge of ours is how do we balance people that have actually invested in multiple accounts and have 4 or 5 Cryptomon on every wallet or playing 3 wallets and have multiple passes because they actually bought them. I personally, from my perspective, if you're paying on multiple accounts, I don't want to prevent you from participating, right? Like whether you're one person playing 4 accounts or you're 4 people, it doesn't really matter to me as long as you're participating in the ecosystem. And obviously, you're spending time doing it. So I don't necessarily like to prevent that type of stuff. It's just much more complicated to do with blockchain because things can move around. So I think in general, just give us some time to kind of work through the challenges and figure things out. Um, that's sort of my general thought because I know it's physically impossible to stop people from having multiple accounts. It's a fool's errand to think that you can actually stop people. So I'd much rather sort of put controls in place like when you swap a Cryptomon from one account to another, you can't battle with it for 24 hours. That way, you can't use the same team to do story challenge on multiple wallets, that type of stuff. I'd much rather fix the underlying problems and let folks sort of do what they want because they're going to do what they want anyway. You guys will be on VPNs or multiple devices, and I'll have no way of fixing it anyway. So I think that's sort of the general approach when it comes to that type of stuff, and you'll see that in the way that we build everything. All right, I think we're pretty much out of time. Ran a little bit over, mostly because I got started late. Appreciate everyone for showing up and hanging out. I'm sure a bunch of you will also be looking forward to the recap. If you have any questions, feel free to ping me on Telegram. potentially even on Discord. I'll try and pay attention there today. But that I think that just about wraps up this this Fireside Dev Chat. I appreciate everyone showing up and playing the game and continuing this journey with us as we move the game forward. Have a good day, everyone.